Death Magnetic. Alright, so before we delay the inevitable of what's about to come, we might as well get to the next official Metallica release that came out back in 2008, which is Death Magnetic, like I said. 2008, I can't believe it's been that long since I've been a Metallica fan. I've known about Metallica since about 2006, 2007-ish, something like that. I think yeah, I can't believe it's been that long because I remember pretty well when Death Magnetic first came out. I was just starting out as a freshman in high school, and I've seen ads like everywhere on TV for like The Day That Never Comes, the album itself. This was pretty unavoidable. I was already highly aware of this band by the time Death Magnetic came out. I downloaded some songs from their past works. I downloaded one of the newer singles at that time, The Day That Never Comes, which I believe is the first single off that album. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I can't believe it's been that long since I've first became a fan of Metallica and was actually like aware of this album's release and stuff like that. So I definitely had a lot of history with this band. Which, yeah, it's like half a decade. I can't believe it's been that long. But anyway, nostalgia aside, let's get into the actual review. So this album kicks off with That Was Just Your Life, which it has like a sort of thumping sound like right at the beginning, like a quickening heartbeat or something. Then it goes into like this trippy sounding melodic lead intro, which kind of sounds like a doomier version of the Enter Sandman intro. Then after that it goes into a much faster pace with faster rhythms and stuff, like a very thrashy sort of beat. It kind of reminds me of like a neutered version of Blackened or something. But, you know, still pretty decent overall. I'll explain why I feel that it seems pretty neutered. So the next thing I'm going to say is going to be quite a contradiction, but I feel that the production on this album is both better and worse than the production on Saint Anger. Rick Rubin comes in as the producer for this album, but I think Metallica is probably doing much of the production work and all. But anyway, the main problem I have with this album, pretty much, is that while the production is slicker than it was on Saint Anger, it's a bit more polished. It's slicker and polished to the point of sacrificing the quality of the dynamics and just the overall sound, and how you're able to just get through the album without having to take your headphones out here and there and just resting your ears, because this album is so freaking loud. The drums here, I think, sound even worse than they do on Saint Anger. They're so overly compressed. They're so especially exploitive of this overly compressed, lacking of dynamics range that they come across more like awfully distorted, like pop noises, like than they do like actual solid drum beats. At least you can actually hear drum beats on Saint Anger. Here, it's just so distorted that it just comes across more like than like an actual drum beat. It's crazy. And the worst part about that is it's so high up in the mix, it is so high up in the register that it's basically like the main focal point of what you're hearing here, which it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be evenly balanced with everything else, but instead you have these noises that are going off right in your ears, and it's out of control. The guitars and bass also lack the thickness and the crunch that you heard on albums like the Black Album, the classic thrash albums, and hell, even Load, Reload, and Saint Anger. Yeah, because of this whole loudness war competition thing that I think may have started earlier, but Death Magnetic most especially exploited it. It just causes a really terrible sound. Like, I spent most of my time basically just listening to this at very low volumes, basically having only one volume bar on my computer, and basically turning down the YouTube volume meter too, because I was listening to a full album stream on YouTube, and it still kind of hurt my ears after a bit. I kind of had to stop just to give my ears a break, because even when I'm just listening to this quietly, the mastering is so distorted and it's so hot. Like, the mastering itself is so hot and in your face that you kind of just want to give your ears a break. The crazy irony about this is that even though it's a very loud album, because a lot of the instruments are distorted, it definitely comes across as being not as heavy because a lot of the instrumentals here just definitely lack the thickness and crunch that you've heard on previous albums, which gives it, I mean, I can't really say less of a metallic feeling, but just less of a harder feeling. There's not enough crunch here because there's so much distortion present in the mix that a lot of these songs definitely fall short when it comes to returning to that thrash metal side that Metallica are definitely proclaiming that they wanted to do with this album. There's not much I can really see there. That's why I made the comment earlier that That Was Just Your Life sounded like a neutered version of Blackened. I mean, owing to their age and all, but the production is the primary cause of that. I'm not saying this album's bad, though. In fact, this album's a million times better than Saint Anger. It's a lot more engaging, and there's definitely a lot of better ideas on here. It's just the reason why I sound mad is because the production is just such a glaring flaw that it really detracts from the experience. But just songwriting-wise, musicality-wise, this is a much-needed improvement over Saint Anger. It's much more of a refreshing listen. Like, immediately after you get from Saint Anger to this, it's like a sigh of relief. For example, I'll name a couple of songs that I liked. The Day That Never Comes, which I downloaded around the time of the album's release. It is kind of like a Fade to Black wannabe. Definitely not as good as Fade to Black, not by a long shot, but still a pretty good song, kind of like that one. The Unforgiven 3, which is the sequel to The Unforgiven off the Black Album and Unforgiven 2 off of Reload. It is definitely not a bad song in itself. It's definitely one of the better songs on here. All Nightmare Long, I remember that being like a Guitar Hero Metallica favorite of mine because, yes, I have played Guitar Hero Metallica and I think it's a fun game, but yeah, All Nightmare Long is definitely a favorite of mine. I definitely like the riffs in this one. Yeah, those are just a couple of highlights that I liked. Again, I have to repeat this, the main thing that's keeping me from listening to these songs regularly is the production. The production is absolutely unlistenable. During the softer parts, it's not as noticeable, but like anytime you hear the drums rear their ugly head, it is always apparent. You always hear the just goddamn awful drums. They are like the worst sounding parts of this album. Yeah, even during the softer moments, they sound horrible. But oh my god, when it gets to the heavier parts of this album, everything is a cluttered mess. Everything is absolutely distorted. The drums just are. I can't put into words how frustrated I get when everything becomes heavy and stuff. It just becomes so clusterfucked with all this loud noise that you can't go on. There's also some not so great ideas here and there. Broken, Beaten, Scarred, and Cyanide are kind of just generic, boring songs that are very hokey in their lyrical subject matter. Oh, and also there's a god-awful instrumental on here called Suicide and Redemption, which is one of the blandest, most forgettable passages of music I've ever heard. The song does nothing for me at all. I've listened to this a couple times. I've always forgotten about it. I literally just listened to it like right before making this review. No, none. Zero memory of it. It is so bland. It is so forgettable. It's just a void of empty space. This gives the 1980s instrumentals just a bad name. I mean, it's pretty disgraceful that this has to exist in the same universe as To Live Is To Die, as Call of Cthulhu, Orion, and even Cliff Burton's bass solo, Anesthesia Pulling Teeth. It just doesn't belong there. It doesn't deserve to be mentioned in the same name as those. Just waste of space, garbage. If only they just stuck to the production techniques that they've had on like their older albums, like the 80s albums, and even the Black Album, which, even though it's like a big name, high budget release, it had great production, of course. Metallica is still a big name today. Well, they just have the same sort of production that they've had on the Black Album. Everything was properly placed exactly where it needed to be. Everything was just at the right volume, so nothing was too loud or anything like that. Even on Justice for All's production's better than this. Hell, even the intro that I've made for my album reviews that you've heard before, I think they sound better produced than this. Even Metallica's early demos, like No Life Till Leather, have a better like sound because the limitations of the time definitely prevent the mastering from being screwed around with and having to be way too distorted and loud beyond belief. I mean, it's truly a shame that the production of an album is the main catalyst to why you're not able to enjoy an album fully, because truly this album is not terrible at all. There are some really like solid, good ideas here, and for them to be ruined and mired by the overall sound and lack of dynamics is it's truly a shame, really, because this album definitely had much more potential to be enjoyed by the masses. But anyway, I think I've said enough about this album. If you guys like the album, that's fine. In fact, like I said, there's good ideas on here, even if the production's horrible. But anyway, I'm delaying the inevitable here. I'm gonna have to move on to I don't want to talk about it. I really don't. I kind of just want to sit here and ramble more and more about this album, but no, I have to move on. The next album will be Lulu, as we all know. Where's a noose around? I need to just hang myself really quick. Ugh.